Hey there, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters.
I'm Patrick Barrett.
This is not Judy.
So no, I'm not Judy.
Just to be clear about that.
You can call me Judy if you like.
You can call me Ray. Today is May 9th, 2017.
That's true.
Just with the timestamp on the program, so to speak. We have quite a few things to talk about. Patrick has been on the program once before.
You brought me back, you fool.
Fool, you fool. But I thought maybe just to sort of start things out, I sort of mentioned a few little updates of things around town. One thing, just to start off on a bit of a sad note, former City Councillor Bob Moncrieff, it was revealed last night during the City Council meeting in a late resolution that he passed away over the weekend. Bob, actually, in one of the programs, on this program, I took an old 1996 recording of the original Cambridge Inside Out with Glenn Kuchar, and it was a two-parter we ran back last July, episodes 157 and 158.
Classics.
Where Bob had written a really great scholarly article on the last years of rent control in Cambridge. It was actually a lot of people came up to me afterwards and said that was really interesting. But anyway, that was Bob Moncrieff, who was the featured person along with Denise Chilson in those programs. And he passed away over the weekend. He was elected in 1969 first, and he served as a city councillor for 2 terms, 1970-73, I believe. So anyway, so sorry to hear about that. Let's see, so what are some other things going on around town?
Oh my God, what's not going on around town?
Oh, actually, it's something very important for us because we're kind of Central Square interested parties.
That's true, and what are you getting at?
I'm getting at the fact that there was a press release from the city asking for members. If anybody wants to apply, there's 1 vacancy each on the Central Square Advisory Committee. They're looking for a resident member, resident representative from the Cambridgeport neighborhood.
I have a stack now of city rejection letters. That would look great next to my planning board rejection letter.
Well, you don't live in Cambridgeport.
Rivers, I'm kind of like on the border.
No. I think the 4 neighborhood representatives. I'm the Mid Cambridge representative. There's Cambridgeport, Area 4, now known as the Port, and what did I miss? Riverside, Cambridgeport, the Port, and Mid Cambridge. Plus business representatives. And anyway, so they're looking for a Cambridgeport representative. So if you're interested, this is something you might want to
Did someone resign?
Actually, I'm not sure, but Michael Monestein, who was
the new Central Square Business Association,
and now he'll take over the role as the executive director of the Central Square.
Who's actually doing a fantastic job.
He's really, really good. He's really energized things.
We love you, Robin, wherever you are.
Yeah, but everybody brings their own skill set, their own talents, and this is good. It's good. We had a great time with the Central Square cleanup.
Oh yes, this was actually the first Central Square cleanup that I was not at. In a long time. We had a little small family emergency, and I was not able to attend.
Yeah, so that was last Wednesday.
Yep. It was well attended, and Michael. It was actually a breath of fresh air because Michael organized the whole thing. He laid it out, and at no point in time was I nervous about it not happening.
Right. That worked out great. One of the great joys I have when we do the Central Square cleanup, in addition to a lot of residents and people who work in companies around Central Square, the Commissioner of Public Works come out, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Works. Yeah. So there I am basically cleaning graffiti off of walls with the top brass of the Public Works Department.
Owen and John O'Donnell.
Yeah.
They're just
great
a fantastic
people.
Organization.
Right, so anyway, there is a vacancy. I think the deadline for application is May 31st. If you're interested in that, there's also a vacancy on the Harvard Square Advisory Committee, and they're looking for a resident representative from the Riverside neighborhood. Yeah, you live in the Riverside neighborhood.
I do live in the Riverside neighborhood, but considering all the hullabaloo going on at Harvard Square, I'd rather just stay home.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so those are a couple of things that go on. Another little update is though it always seems absurd, now that we're still in the budget season for, we're doing for fiscal year 2018, the participatory budget which is a part of the fiscal year's budget for 2019, is actually beginning now.
The participatory budget thing, I think it's interesting. I think it's wonderful that the city has such an amount of resources that we can throw. What is it, 800,000 this year?
It's going to be 800,000.
We yielded. I think the first process got us the Central Square toilet.
That's the second year.
Oh, second year. Okay,
Yeah.
so that we were still waiting for that to be installed. Anxious to see what interesting things it might bring. But,
Right.
It's just it's a very strange process, but I think it's an interesting.
The thing about it, it's actually the reason why I didn't, they look for outreach people, they look for people who kind of help out in every which way. I actually took a step away from it, even though I was kind of intrigued by it all, because I wanted some of the more activist community to actually get involved in something constructive, rather than just
Is it destructive?
No, I mean, I hate to sound elitist about this, but basically my logic was if there are people who basically live and breathe to just block everything and obstruct everything, if you could redirect some of that ample supply of energy toward trying to do something constructive, maybe you change a few minds, you know. So I stepped away and let other people get it.
A very diplomatic approach of you, Robert. I'm proud of you. You're growing.
Yeah, I'm really trying.
All roads
I'm
up.
really trying. Yeah. So anyway, that happened. We've gone through 3 cycles now. I think I've gone to the awards ceremony or the announcements each of the 3 years.
Do we have categories yet, or are we not quite there?
They only they basically you don't submit projects by category. You put them in.
Are there any?
And then I think they organize them into categories so that when people are voting, that they assist them.
So are we at the point where projects have been submitted yet? Or
No,
we're still,
no. They're doing an outreach program. That'll happen first. It's all scheduled. I'm not going to.
You mean to tell me you're not even going to suggest that there be a mini golf course and kind of?
I have suggested a few things, but I've never taken it to the point of.
That's a participatory budget item right there. Mini golf course.
I'm 100% behind.
I'm behind you. I think that's the one reason why I've got that bumper sticker on my truck.
There you go. right. So anyway, so that it's a happening. And I think maybe we'll agree on this in terms of. I like the fact it's a very limited pot of money compared to the whole city budget, right? I'm sure there's some, the radicalized group would rather remove all authority from the city council to approve budgets and take it out in the streets, man, and we'll all just decide how all money should be allocated.
You know I love hippies as much as the next person, but I'll have to defer to you in this.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of direct democracy. I actually, even when we have elected officials, and I'm not singling anybody out here, who are less than perfectly effective, I'd rather go with representative
Less
democracy.
than perfectly effective. Isn't that an interesting way to put
I'm
it?
trying to get back. Especially at the U.S. congressional level, for example, I don't think that the elected officials are always fully informed. They're very much dependent on their staffs, and maybe they're not always the best people.
Oh, I think we've got great examples even on the national level of people not reading certain things that are being passed.
Right, but on the other hand, if the alternative was to say, well, let's put everything to a vote, a popular vote, that's a ridiculous notion.
Well,
so this is a limited pot of money, and and it's sort of a good exercise, community exercise.
you will never have to convince me that limiting government is not a more effective way to get things done.
The one very specific issue I have with the participatory budgeting is, well, 2 things. One is that I think there are actually some city departments and groups who are basically using it to supplement a budget as opposed to have a truly community-bred idea, right? They say, don't worry, we'll get the extra money through participatory budgeting, right? And they put that heavy hand on the community process.
Right.
I don't know that that's a.
I don't see that. Well, do you think that's really something that's going on in participatory budget now?
I could single out a few particular projects. It didn't happen so much last year.
Right. I think there was you see favorites that look like they're sort of part of a scheme or a plan, but I think even with the Central Square toilet, we did some advocacy for it, but it felt like it was a process that was something that people wanted.
The issue I have, this is really my primary issue I would take up with participatory budgeting, is actually something like the Central Square toilet. So what happens is that you put it to a vote that this has to happen somewhere, and then it's not a matter of the idea kind of bubbling up organically. It's sort of saying, okay, people voted for this, therefore it has to happen, even if upon looking at it, you start to have second thoughts about it. You're not allowed to have second thoughts about it.
Yeah, once the ship sails,
Right.
it's sailing. And then with the toilet, especially in Central Square, I think some people were excited. Even the people who now are facing the fact of it being in front of their property were excited about having it, but when they found out it was going to be in front of their property, were less excited about it.
Right. Now,
a lot less.
Now, on the other, the vision that was pushed forward was of a freestanding, like Portland Loo type of public toilet. My feeling is that the best way to do this is to have a storefront operation where the police, MBTA, public toilet, a lot of things can all sort of happen in a
homeless building. We're looking at you.
Right, and and that would be the ultimate solution. But if the participatory budgeting specifically stated something like a public toilet with a vision of it being this outdoor facility there, it's kind of hard to repurpose the discussion.
Well, the tinfoil hat set and a lot of the more active activists are always wary of like a public-private process. So if we had something where through participatory budgeting, or that's how it was funded by the city, that's a private owner would then supply a restroom to the public, that would probably raise a few eyebrows. I think they were trying to do something similar with the Mass and Main project. I don't think that had any legs, but I don't disagree.
Right.
I think that there was definitely a better way to get a toilet into Central Square than have it be this thing that we pay for that freezes in the wintertime.
Right.
Right in front of the tax man, which we'll see how it goes.
I just generally like the idea of sort of dual function things. So if you have a store, if you have a purpose, but you can match it with a underutilized retail space or whatever, all the better. It's similar like I mentioned we have our regular every other Wednesday meeting on safety and infrastructure in Central Square, right? Which is I think it's one of the more productive and important get-togethers that happens around the city. But remember I suggested when we were, actually I think it was in the context when we were talking about doing cleanup in Central Square, I suggested that we put up some of these like book corrals, those little free libraries.
Yeah, start off with the sort of taking the Kendall Square idea of little libraries and making it almost like a trading post in Central Square.
But then it occurred to me at a later meeting, and I suggested that where they have those traffic control boxes that look like just empty. There's one right there.
Yeah.
They just look like empty tombstone, and they try and gussy them up by putting art. Well, this one says CCTV, so I'm not going to tag them, right? But they're just sort of these tombstones that just sit there on the sidewalk, and it's sort of like dead space. So I said, maybe what we can do, and actually I'm talking to somebody at MIT about this, and actually find a way of putting these little free libraries and integrate them right into some of those tombstone control boxes. So you can open up a panel and there's the control box. But
that's a great idea.
Otherwise, it acts as something useful.
And the control box is the one that, especially the new one they put in Carl Barron Plaza, is just a giant block. It makes a crappy area crappier.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that's the best way I can describe it.
I mean, I'm a big fan of urban clutter, but one kind of clutter I don't like is just having control boxes every 50 feet, or more, or whatever. If you can actually just make kind of interesting urban clutter, I'm better for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got anything, well, in Central Square especially, I think the urban clutter could be a little more thoughtful.
Right. If you speak about urban clutter, people say, well, we like what do they always say about the grunge of Central Square?
The grittiness.
The grittiness, But if
I was in a planning process for a project I have in Central Square right now, and part of my mandate to the design team was that if anyone said the word gritty, I would smack them. It went down.
Good.
No one said gritty.
Good. Well, I encourage people often to look at some of these historic photos from like the 1940s, 50s, whatever, in Central Square. The Roach Library down at MIT has a really great collection. Real high resolution black and white photos showing it. And back then, this was like a family-oriented place. Oh. People would come up to the avenue to go shopping.
A different world completely.
Very different world, So it went through a period where it kind of degraded. And
putting it so gently.
I'm trying to be a nice guy, right? But then people want to embrace the degradation. Now, I don't want to throw everybody out or anything like that, but but I'd like to bring it back and have it really be a place where there are actually attractions for families.
Well, I think the interesting thing about those times when there was more urban clutter and it was more of an active commercial hub of the city, all those aspects that people sort of find to be the grungy or gritty part, we're probably there. We're there. You just didn't notice it as much because it was more active and more vibrant.
Yeah, I've made that point actually, but Harvard Square, the difference when people were comparing, Harvard Square and Central Square, I said, the difference it's actually changed quite a bit. That in Harvard Square, you might have, drunkards and junkies around, but you also have a lot of really great eye candy.
But in Harvard Square, you have Harvard professors and Harvard students.
Right. You have all these sort of, the beautiful people, but you also have beautiful window displays, you have interesting buildings and whatever, And in Central Square, the reason why you tended to notice some of the sort of more unsightly things was because your eye was drawn to that because of the lack of something else.
Right. And that part of that decline has almost eradicated all of those things. So now all that you really do notice are these sort of negative aspects, which I think we're trying to turn the bus a little bit on that. But it's a long process to change both perception and the look of an area.
Well, having walked the streets of Central Square back in the late 1970s through the 80s, 90s, aughts, and teens, right? I can absolutely say how it's improved. We still have burdens that other parts of the city don't have to deal with, but generally it's improved. There's the nighttime Central Square is something. That's very, very active, very busy.
It's busy on a Tuesday night, which is
right. The biggest challenge we've identified this back in the 90s when I was on this Central Square committee, when we were doing some of the infrastructure improvements, was that all of the focus was going toward nighttime uses, bars and restaurants and whatever are coming in. But in terms of places where a family might actually go shopping or do ordinary things in the daytime, mom with some kids or whatever, a lot of that was just neglected and honestly really hasn't come up to what it should be.
Well, I have some sad news for you on that front. So the shopping areas of yesterday and those kinds of places are under much more stress than they ever been before, and it's nearly impossible to keep a vibrant retail corridor alive if you don't have a population that's built in to support it.
That's right.
That's what Harvard Square is facing now. That's what Central Square has been facing for multiple decades, and it's really why you see stores closing now. Because if I can order everything in the universe on Amazon, and I don't have to go out my door, the potentiality of using these other places becomes much less. The Target just showed up in Central Square, and that's been very vibrant. And according to the landlord there, they're extremely successful, and they're beating numbers that they would typically find in one of their major stores. So that's a good thing. So I think the demand is there. I just think it's only a Target. Unfortunately, I think some people have this sort of delusion that Robert and Patrick's good old timey, everything shop could open up, but it really takes a national brand in this particular case to do it.
Central Square and pretty much every downtown everywhere has always had a mix of national stores, whether it was a Rexall drugstore chain or the Woolworths or Sears Roebuck or whatever.
Right. Or Woolworths used to be, right?
When people sort of uniformly come out against national chains, they want to have everything local. I think they're kind of missing the boat.
Yeah.
You need a mix,
exactly,
right? And having a few national anchors, that's not the end of the world. I think it's actually really healthy. It draws people in.
Draws those people in, and when they buy whatever stuff, tchotchkes they're buying at that store, they're going to go have lunch across the street. They're going to maybe see a store they never even knew existed, and they're going to shop there.
That's right. I did overhear a conversation with one of the managers at the Target store there was somebody saying, well, I came here looking for baby clothes or whatever, and I couldn't find this, whatever. And they said, well, over time, they started off with a selection of what was going to be on the shelves, on the racks at the Target store, but that wasn't set in stone.
Well, imagine you're the manager starting up this new Target store, trying to figure out what Central Square needs.
Right.
The answer is everything.
Everything.
So how do you do everything?
Keep the conversation open.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to talk to the store managers and
They're very friendly.
We really want this, and and don't be shocked if in fact they respond and it starts showing up.
Just don't tell them to sell ice cream.
That's right.
Or pizza or Chinese food.
A little protectionism there, Mr.
Just a little bit. Looking out for my people.
All right. Now, so anyway, participatory budget is coming in. You can look up on the city website, or this is actually up on the Civic Journal. You can also check it out there. So if you want to find out more about that, if you want to be involved as a volunteer, check it out. Do it up. The broader a cross section of people, the better. So don't be afraid if you're, no matter what your perspective is, to sort of jump right in. Miniature golf. Now we're talking, right? That's my project, absolutely. Now another thing I want to mention was that last, was it Thursday morning, something they do every year. They've been doing it for some number of years now. They had the 2017 Outstanding City Employee Award recipients. Most of them were announced in advance, and there's one special award they only announce when they actually give it. So that took place on Thursday. So I like to go to that. I have to say it's primarily city employees and some family members. So they don't really, honestly, they don't particularly advertise it.
Right.
But I like to go because there are a lot of city employees who I really like, and I appreciate what they do.
It's the weird thing about Cambridge, and I've been here for 10 years now, and I can't think of living in probably a dozen other places. I had no idea who was picking up my trash. I had no idea who to call or even to talk to relative to even city government. This place is like dialed in for knowing who these people are, and they're super friendly and almost like at first like scarily helpful.
Right. I remember when I first moved here from New York, I was quite shocked at how responsive city government was even back then in 1978.
I missed the first place I bought here. I missed my trash date. I called up the DPW like
send a truck right
like
out.
a fool, asking where the dump was. And they're like,
Right.
"You don't have a dump? We'll send a truck." And I was like,
Yeah. You're going to send a
Really?
truck to pick up my rubbish? Yeah.
"Fantastic."
Yeah, no, it's really like that. And Public Works Department especially has always prided itself on being a very service-oriented,
They're completely
customer
top-notch.
service-oriented department. And one of the really nice things about this award ceremony is that they're awarding, people who are department heads, and they're awarding people who are, the guy who's running a parking lot, guys who've worked in 30 years on a rubbish truck. It's not, they don't make distinction. I mean, the thing is whoever gets nominated, if they're really, really well liked and they do a great job, they're going to get the recognition. So it's a great thing. So it was a good list. I'm not going to go through all the names here. It's up on the city website. You can see it if you want. I'm going to mention just a few particular people, just because these are kind of my faves, right? One was Lee Gianetti, who's the communications person working out of the manager's office. Louis DiPasquale, the city manager, basically outright said how incredibly dependent he's been on Lee as he's sort of transitioning into the city manager role. And Lee sort of helps. I mean, Louis, he kind of acknowledges maybe he isn't the best speaker. Mm-hmm. Lee kind of helps out, writing some of the words. And he appreciates that, right?
I appreciate a city manager who can...
just speaks the truth, really.
Exactly.
And Louis great that way. Another person who was just really wonderful, I really respect her, is Nicole Murati-Ferrer, who's the new and current executive director of the License Commission.
She's fantastic.
She's really fantastic, and I want to single out her above all others here because the License Commission, now you can make a case that maybe some of their procedures over the many years have been a little loose or whatever. People love to sort of make assaults.
Everyone likes to give a bad rap to the organization that doesn't do the thing that they want them to do.
Right.
So,
but she came in and she's sort of trying to kind of make it consistent, do it right, and I'll tell you that's a position where there are people who will really assault you. Yeah. Maybe not physically assault you, but will really try and make your life a living hell.
Emotions run high. So
really run high.
People are going there to forward their businesses or get licensed to do this, that, and the other thing. It affects the neighbors. It affects the businesses themselves.
I mean, it's a serious amount of money on the line for people. Yeah. It's true. So it's a hard job. You're really stuck right between a rock and a hard place all the time. And she does that job with grace and consistency, and I think she's been wonderful. Yeah. And and I hope she sticks around a long time because she's got a combination of grace and steel, and you need.
She's that perfect combination of like very friendly yet arm's distance, don't get too close. Yeah. And which like the word I'm looking for is professional.
Absolutely. Now, a few others mentioned here, as we kind of wind down our first half hour. One was Nancy Tauber, former member of the school committee. She kind of joked when she got her receipt. She said, best thing ever happened was not getting reelected. Because it just happened right at the time there was a vacancy in this kids council, which is now called I think it's called the Family Policy Council or something like that. Again, I'm not going to name the names here, but honestly, her predecessor, it was a disaster under her predecessor, and she's really revitalized it and made it very useful and relevant. So good for her. So she was one of the recipients. Another person was the Deputy Superintendent of Schools, Carolyn Turk. Now, Carolyn has actually stepped in and temporarily served as school superintendent during searches. Many people believe she should have been the superintendent, I might add, right? And I think there's a pretty good case to be made for that. But she has just been the most dedicated person to the public schools, and she was very, very deserving, I felt. And the last name I mentioned here was, they give this special award in honor of Brian Murphy, who was a good friend. And the award recipient, I have to say, this is kind of, I feel prescient in this way, in that it's happened 3 times, and I said, who should get this? Who should get this?
I think Owen was the first recipient?
I thought, Owen O'Riordan, Public Works Commissioner, I think it was a guy who should really be considered. He was the first recipient. Yeah. And then last year I was saying, who I would give it to? Is Ellen Semenoff, who's the head of the Human Services Programs. 2.
Whoa. So who's your third?
This year I said it should go to Gina Franconi, and it went to Gina Franconi.
Oh,
I am 3 for 3.
Very nice.
Right?
Very nice.
And I kind of feel good about that because of people who I really think deserve the recognition. And there's some other rather significant reasons why there's a certain beautiful quality to the fact that Gina was the recipient, but I will not go into that.
I think. I had my own favorite city employees as well, but I think there's a good crew. So
yeah, it's a really good crew. So anyway, we've got more to talk about. And we'll be back in a few minutes on Cambridge Inside Out.